Oh, looks like he signed off.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, Gabi, you can start.
All right, there we go. Okay, can I start, Kassar?
Yeah, you can start.
Great. Okay, well, great, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name's Gabi Townsend, and I'm a volunteer with Family Caregivers of BC. My background has involved some employment counseling, workshop development, and lots of delivery, management, and social service organizations. And most recently, was working with families caring for someone with dementia through the Alzheimer Society. My own experience as a caregiver was supporting my mom and dad through the journey with dementia, my mom's journey. And now I am in kind of an interesting caregiver role because my dad, who's 98, bless his heart, is living on his own and just doing so super well. It's almost phenomenal. And so I'm there to help, but keeping an eye out, but letting him have as much independence as he would like. So also with my other retirement time, I had the opportunity to do more social services, human service, community-oriented work, including facilitating support groups with family caregivers and delivering workshops on advanced care planning and raising awareness of senior abuse and neglect through the community response networks of BC. So I thank Emily and the Foundation for inviting me to present today on behalf of family caregivers. So any questions that you have, you could try to maybe jot down in the Q&A. Now, I'm not sure how many people are actually joining us because there's a fair number of people on a number of different platforms. You could also try the raise hand feature, and Kassar is our technical support today, and maybe he can help manage the Q&A section to help us keep track of the ongoing questions. Now, one thing I need to kind of fit with here is, there we go. No, that's not what I want to do either. Okay. All right, so let's get started. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Indigenous territory that I live and work on. I'm in Victoria this morning, and which is situated on the unceded territory of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. I'd like to also invite you to take a moment to reflect on the territory where you're located. And if you're not too sure of that, there are maps such as this on our screen available from the Canadian website that will help to inform you about the First Nations that you're living on. So what we'll talk about today is a little introduction to family caregivers. I have some interesting figures to share with you, and then we're going to talk a bit more about you as caregivers, what that experience is like, and how you can support yourself through a variety of different strategies and processes and organizations. So we are a not-for-profit charity dedicated 100% to the well-being of family caregivers. We've been around for some 30 years now. We were the very first in Canada of its type, and now there are still only 2 other organizations besides us across the country. So, and we are funded through the Ministry of Health. We work on sort of 3 pillars of support. One of them is called caregiver support. So here is where we operate our support line, this 1-800 number, which you might want to jot down. as you are welcome to call at any time to talk to volunteers and staff who will understand your journey and can provide you with all kinds of information and sometimes just that listening ear. We run support groups, and we also offer coaching, which is some special one-on-one time with someone for a limited number of sessions when a situation is particularly tricky. And then our website has so many great resources on everything I'll talk about today and more. That resource library also includes webinars, podcasts, videos, our newsletters, articles, blogs. Oh my goodness, like so many things that you can reach out for on your own. We also do support group facilitator training across BC to other organizations who are also starting off, wanting to start off support groups. And then on the engagement and collaboration pillar is where we are working together with government across the country, as well as here in BC. We work with health authorities, participating in Ministry of Health research. We are working actively to have the voice of caregivers heard, not only in the health system, but really across government, that they understand the challenges and contributions that caregivers are making. So not everyone immediately identifies as a family caregiver. Like what we often hear on the support line is, well, you know, I'm a husband, or I'm a son, or I'm a wife, and it's just what I do. People cared for me, people raised me, I'm going to look after them. But really the definition entails being a family member or friend who is providing care and support to someone with either a disease, a disability, or frailty that just comes with normal aging. And really that role is often really well defined between the person receiving care and the person giving the care. It can be a very special and intimate relationship, a really meaningful time between two people that, as the quote says from our executive director, that can be often quite life-changing. Now, it's likely we all know someone who is a caregiver. It was Rosalind Carter who said, everyone will be a caregiver, is a caregiver, has been a caregiver, or will receive care themselves. So you might be astounded by some of these numbers. There are 7.8 million caregivers in Canada that are offering unpaid care for family, friends, and neighbors. That's about 28% of our population. So that's like 1/3 of the population in Canada is offering caregiving services. 27% of the Canadians between 15 and 19 are called young caregivers. So they are between the ages of 15 and 19. 1 in 4 Canadians, therefore, aged 15 years and older are caregivers. In BC, that equates to, again, 28% of the population, or 1.3 approximately million people, are doing caregiving work. Now, the Vanier Institute conducted a review in about 2017 and found that 3/4 of caregivers are employed as well. So that again speaks to the amount of time and effort that caregivers are putting into their roles. I mean, the bottom line is that more and more people are becoming caregivers, and many of them are balancing employment and caregiving. 21% of people report spending 20 hours or more a week on the caregiving role. 13% of caregivers are providing care to a spouse or partner. They are more likely to be older than those who care for a parent. And They spend about 14 hours a week on caregiving activities. And out of the 7.8 million caregivers, about 600,000 provide care to a child with a long-term health condition. Now, we know caregivers are pretty busy people. They provide help in sort of these four key categories: transportation, medical treatments, personal care, appointments. Sounds pretty easy, sounds pretty slick. But I'd like to invite anyone who wants to say maybe some of the specific tasks that are involved in those areas that perhaps if you're a caregiver, that you would like people to know what it is that you do. For example, transportation could probably mean driving someone to an appointment and back. However, it could also mean booking the taxis, booking the handy darts, being present when the person returns from their outing, making the applications to the handy dart, managing the taxi savers, right? Anyone else want to offer up anything else that are specifics within these categories? So you can just unmute yourselves. I believe you can, Kasar, or Kasar can do that.
No, everyone can unmute themselves.
Okay, so if you want to add anything, you certainly can. I'm also thinking of things like personal care. Well, my goodness, what goes under personal care? Helping with a bath, helping with showers, getting them undressed, getting them dressed, sometimes cajoling people to get that bath happening. Maybe then it's a sponge bath, it's toileting, it's hair care, facial hair care. That means then setting up appointments for barbers and hairdressers and foot care and so on and so on. Medication, well, helping with medical treatments, yes, caregivers can actually start giving needles and are doing wound dressing. And all the things around the home that really aren't mentioned in this list as a category, which is taking over, paying bills, managing finances, managing any legal concerns, looking after the yard as well as the home and the car. And, you know, a big one is being present at medical appointments to talk with healthcare professionals to help to understand what their person is experiencing and how best to help them to be comfortable and have a good quality of life. So is it any wonder that we see caregivers in distress? A report from the Seniors Advocate in BC, even though it was 2018, reported 31% in distress. But the other point to note is that the previous year in 2017, the number of people reporting themselves in distress was only 27%. So we're starting to see that increase in the number of caregivers calling out for help. Caregivers often talk about feeling stressed about time and money, physical and emotional tiredness and overwhelm, and with no time for themselves on that day-to-day basis. Now, in the professional world, this is referred to as caregiver burden. Not my favorite term, but it does help to illustrate to others and possibly those others being within the health community, government communities, etc., of the weight in time, effort, energy that a caregiver carries. Different thresholds exist for what creates caregiver burden, right? Every caregiver is going to feel the load differently. And, you know, at the same time that many people express this distress, many people also talked about the positive aspects of their role and how much it means to them. On the caregiver helpline, we hear the stories every day of how caregivers are struggling and the challenges that they're facing in this role. So some of the challenges that we can, kind of the top 10 list that we can talk about are listed here. And going through the list, you may be starting to make a small checklist of to yourself of how many of these apply to you. Overload and exhaustion. The complex family dynamics comes up a lot in support groups, right? Where we have caregivers on scene kind of thing, doing the hard day-to-day work, and then family that lives away and has a lot to say about how that person is managing the caregiving experience. All the difficult conversations you have to have with a person that you're caring for, and with extended family members also. And one of the big ones is probably this ongoing grief and loss, what's termed anticipatory grief. It's something that kind of hits when a diagnosis is made or an event like a car accident happens, and there are losses. You've lost the life you used to have. You've lost a partner or a parent or a child who's not able to experience and share your life with you as they used to do. And we know, for a lot of people, that means a lifespan is going to be cut short. And so there's a lot of anticipatory grief going on. And despite that, caregivers carry on. So if a lot of those challenges apply to you, probably a lot of these signs of stress will apply to you also. Caregivers suffering from stress can exhibit any or all of these symptoms. The other thing that I sadly need to add to this list is abuse. My work with the Community Response Network is about raising awareness of senior abuse, neglect, and self-neglect. And when we see tired out, exhausted, overwhelmed caregivers, we can see more abuse happening to seniors and vulnerable adults as their caregivers become more stressed. Now, I don't know how many of you perhaps saw the article, end of last week, I think, that talked about a senior man who was a dad being looked after by his daughter, found at the bottom of a set of stairs with obvious marks of having been struck. And the 40-year-old daughter had been caring for him all this time, all on her own. He had dementia, he had COPD, and also was unable to walk well. And she was doing everything for him and hadn't reached out for any kind of help. And it appears that she ultimately, they must have had an argument, and she was physical with him, and he ended up falling down the stairs. And she was actually not charged because of the fact that she was so overwhelmed. They realized it was caregiver overwhelm, essentially, was how I read the story. So specifically, there can be a potential huge negative impact on the health of caregivers, up to twice the rate of developing illness or chronic health conditions as for someone who is not a caregiver. And the reality is that about 33% of caregivers die before the person they are caring for. So many reasons for this, right? Stress releases hormones into our system called cortisol and epinephrine and adrenaline, and they circulate through the bloodstream and prepare us for a stressful moment. But caregivers living with stress day to day, year to year, are feeding cortisol into their system on a regular basis. And it is a very nasty hormone in terms of the damage it begins to inflict on the heart, the kidney, the liver, and the brain. So we see lots more depression and anxiety, insomnia, hypertension, poor immune systems, back injuries, and other injuries, as people are just too tired and not paying attention. So if we were going to categorize the life of a caregiver, they are on the edge of depression, injury, burnout. They took on caregiving on top of full-time work and other roles that they might have had, that they have, and yet they are on the outside of the, when they're trying to work with any care teams and on the outside of activities going on in society, basically feeling invisible and unheard. Why do these themes keep coming up? Well, first of all, family caregivers don't always self-identify, right? So we heard about that earlier on in this presentation. Secondly, it's the care recipient who ends up being the focus of care, right, for doctors and nurses and physiotherapists and so on. And caregiver is kind of ignored in that. One-time offers of help are made by well-meaning neighbors and friends, but for a number of reasons are not accepted. And so those people waiting on the sidelines to maybe help with what's going on might feel that their help isn't wanted or needed, and so they back off. And also, there's not enough diversity in the kinds of caregiving supports that are needed for all the different kinds of situations, right? So someone caring for an ill child is going to have a lot of more different needs than someone who's caring for a spouse with dementia. Not all caregivers need the same supports at the same times. It all will differ on the situations they're in. So how do we shift our culture to recognize, support, and include family caregivers, particularly recognizing the work that they're doing and the countless millions of hours that they contribute as a whole outside of the healthcare system? So PACE is something that we talk about with caregivers. It's not something that we anticipate happening to us, although Rosalind Carter has been trying to say that, right? There's going to be a time when you are called on to offer that kind of support to someone you know. But we don't, we're not trained for it. We don't anticipate it. Sometimes it just happens, and it then suddenly becomes the new normal in our life. And it's not easy. It can burn you out. Experiencing some stress is part of everyday life, but when the symptoms of stress persist, as we talked about, they can be really harmful. However, not that this is totally all negative. It can also be one of the most rewarding and meaningful gifts that you can give to another person. So, because of sometimes the unpredictability of the role, our lives can already be full with all the family roles we have on board, with our work roles, volunteering, playing on sports teams, traveling, all the kinds of things that make our life full and rich. And at first, caregivers are going to try to squeeze their caregiving into a busy life without letting anything else go. But what ends up happening is that caregiving will turn into a marathon. Caregivers will extend their energy beyond their boundaries for too long. It's just like, right, I'm going to run those 26 miles, and then I'm going to jump in the water and bike and swim, and then I'm going to get out and bike, and I can do it all, and I have to do it all. And you realize partway through that run that maybe you're not ready for this, didn't train hard enough, or I don't have that kind of energy in me. My age is a factor. My own health issues are a factor. And yet, what do I do if this pace never stops? So understanding how you feel is the first step to coping with stress. So becoming aware of your thoughts and your emotions will help you to know what self-care strategies you will need to include or try out. So practicing self-awareness allows you to become aware of your inner thoughts and emotions and actually support you then in taking action, because you can't kind of know what it is you need until you know how you're feeling. So a few sort of basic steps to practicing some self-care. It's important to acknowledge how you feel, first of all, to see and hear yourself in the situation. Oh, excuse me, I have to just plug in my computer. I'm going to blame it on my kitty cat, who I think pulled out my cable. So you're going to acknowledge how you feel and really step back, step out of yourself and see and hear yourself in your situation, and then identify what kind of comfort will meet your needs. And then forming an action plan to integrate any activity that creates a sense of comfort and well-being. Can have short or long-term impacts. It might be just going out onto the porch or onto the deck and practicing some breathing strategies for 4-7-8 or box breathing or something like that. It might be taking a walk around the block. It might be signing up to a yoga class and making that happen a couple of times a week for you. So whatever brings you comfort is what's going to work. Okay, there we go. So just be aware though, self-care isn't necessarily self-improvement. I mean, if learning is something important to you, or you have decided that something, a more spiritual activity like yoga or meditation or Tai Chi might be helpful, and you'd like to learn it, by all means, take that on. Any self-care goal is around meeting your own needs, that you feel better, that you feel cared for and more grounded. So we're just going to touch on a few of these kind of self-care strategies over the next 20 minutes or so. And you can take note of the ones that might that you'd like to explore a little further. It's certainly by calling our 1-800 number, you can get lots of information from the person on the other end of the phone about any of these strategies. They can send you lots more information on that contains some details about these 6 different strategies and what kinds of activities would fit inside those. So self-compassion is pretty important to us. It leads to increased feelings of happiness, optimism, and gratitude. It's linked to better coping skills, and actually leads to more satisfaction when you're caring for someone. It's crucial for caregivers, not only because it helps us forgive ourselves for our inevitable mistakes, but also because it allows us to acknowledge and comfort ourselves in the difficulties of our caregiving role. So it might look like something like, saying, well, this is hard right now. It's no wonder that I'm feeling sad, or no wonder I'm feeling stressed. It's offering yourself that space to make mistakes and not to be hard on yourself. Dr. Kristen Neff is a world expert on self-compassion, and she's written a book called Self-Compassion, if that's something you'd like to explore a little bit more. Really, the first step to self-compassion is that self-kindness, acknowledging your pain and suffering. It's not selfish. It's just acknowledging reality, and saying something like, while I can provide a certain level of care, I can't do everything and I can't do it all by myself. Everybody has limitations. Anybody in this situation would feel the way I'm feeling right now. It's also saying things like, everyone has hardships in life and I'm no exception, right? I'm going to make mistakes. This is difficult, but everyone would be feeling the same as me. We need to be able to acknowledge when we're suffering, to be with our pain long enough to respond with care and kindness, but also to manage the balance so that you're not staying long enough with any negative thoughts. You will face challenges in this role, absolutely, but this will help you to be more empathetic, especially with yourself. So we learned how important connection was during the pandemic, right? So one of the challenges for caregivers is definitely isolation. In my support group, from time to time, I'll ask them, what is the one thing that they wish people would do for them? And the answer was surprising to me. They just wished someone would come over or call and just check in, not to offer solutions. They weren't even looking for solutions. They know exactly what they're up against, what the world is like for them, what the health situation is like for their person they're caring for. They're not looking for a solution from their friends and neighbors. They're looking for connection. They're looking for someone who would just listen, not offer that advice, just listen, just to sit beside. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Winnie the Pooh and his little friends. And there's a lovely picture and I always think I should put that cartoon in here at this point where, someone says, Winnie, Pooh, I guess they call him Pooh. Pooh, you're looking sad today. Can I just sit with you? And Pooh says yes. And then they just sit quietly together. And that's often all a caregiver really needs sometimes. One woman in the support group had said, my house used to be the center of our social group. We had 3 or 4 other couples who would always come by and, we'd have coffee, we'd play cards, we ate dinners together, we barbecued. And one by one, they've all drifted away as my husband's diagnosis came to light and he became more ill. Now nobody even stops by for coffee. Well, the rest of us, that just wrenched our hearts. Also, know that caregivers don't like asking for help. I don't know what it is, right? Well, I do know what it is. It's a number of different factors, right? There's embarrassment. There's a feeling of I can do this by myself, and I want to be independent, and we want to be independent, and so we value that pretty highly. But the truth of the matter is that caregiving is not something that can be accomplished alone. It is not. Period. End of sentence. So can you allow others to share in the care with you? And it was one of the ways that we've tried to, at the Alzheimer Society, tried to get families to look elsewhere for some extra help and support. It was sharing in the care. They weren't giving it up. They had a network of people, though, that could come in and help. So one of the things that we suggest is making a list of your daily and weekly tasks, and then consult your circle of friends and ask who's willing to do what. Also, get to know community organizations. So those of you who have case managers in the health system, Lean on those case managers. Start asking for, the help that other organizations can provide, meal deliveries, driving to appointments. Those kinds of things can be offered. I know here in Victoria, they're offered through a number of community volunteer groups. So trying to also, again, in that self-awareness vein, look at the feelings of guilt or embarrassment or pride, and really examine those and see if what you're doing is helping you to overcome those feelings. Now, the Family Caregivers offers a number of support groups. I run one that is that is BC-wide, online once a month. We also have now in Victoria some in-person groups. And again, because of all the training that Family Caregivers has been doing with other organizations throughout BC, there are caregiver support groups in so many communities and in so many community centers around the province. This is a place where you can come to find others who are going through what you're going through. I think the number one reason that I hear that people come to support groups is that they're with people who understand. There's no explaining anything. There's no one to have to justify anything to. They can say the really hard things out loud and not be judged. And that is just so important to the caregivers, certainly that I've seen in my groups over the years. So again, you can check our website at familycaregiversbc.ca, or check in with your own community. Just type in some family caregiver groups, support groups, and the name of your community, and good old Dr. Google will probably help you find something close to you. So another big piece of self-care, the personal supports. Okay, so we talked about some ways that you yourself can apply some strategies, but what else is out there to help you get supports? So in order for that to work, you need to be able to make the request for help, and you need to be able to accept the offers of help. Then it's having some open and honest discussion about your needs, about your feelings about this whole thing, and then some sharing of tasks and follow-up of whatever is going on. It is a cycle, and it goes beyond one ask. Here at Family Caregivers, we have, we refer to this as a circle of support, and we actually run some training on the circle of support. So you can sign up for our newsletter, and I think 3 or 4 times a year, they run the couple of hour session on how to actually build and use a circle of support to help you with your self-care needs as well. It's sometimes the biggest thing you can do is to find the one person who's a real organizer and let them organize that for you. So if you're feeling a little embarrassed about making the direct ask, a friend or family member who'd like to organize this for you probably can take that on with that sort of 1 degree of separation, which might make it a little easier to make the ask and get commitment from people. Another part of your self-care routine is finding balance. Balance between the demands of caring for someone else while taking care of your own physical, mental, social, and emotional health. This is the only way that caregiving can be sustainable over the long haul. And I really want you to think about this question. It's difficult, but it's one that if nothing else has resonated yet, maybe this one will. If you burn out, if you get sick, if you're not able to care for your person, who's going to do it? How will the rest of your family manage? Does it help anyone else if you are unwell? If you're operating at 50% capacity, you're probably not able to do everything you would like to do that requires 100% of you. And is that fair to the person that you're caring for? So it's not selfish to focus on you. Instead, it's good management to include self-care in with all the other things that you're doing. Now, caregivers who are resilient also find their caregiving journey is a little easier. So this image is quite lovely, and it kind of talks about it easily. Oh my goodness, that felt like an earthquake. Wow, sorry. Talk about being resilient. I'll pop back into the session. This image of fresh new twigs growing in the spring sunshine is a nice image to describe what resilience is. Late winter storms can come, dumping snow on the new growth. And what happens after that weather warms up and the snow melts away? Those new twigs and branches are able to spring back to life and continue to grow. That's resiliency. You know, there's going to be tough times in your journey. There's going to be down times and up times, and sometimes it's going to feel like more down times than up times. So do you have what it takes to make it through those down times, right? And that kind of relates to the other slide about balance, and including self-care in the caregiving, all the caregiving activities, because you have to be able to be ready when those times get tough, when they things seem like they're hitting bottom. Dr. Georges Vaillant, whose quote we borrowed here, is an American psychiatrist, actually, and you can look him up if you'd like to learn a little bit more about resilience, and as well, we can send you some information from Family Caregivers. Resilience is dynamic. Okay, you're going to have moments when you feel down and when you feel stronger again. It's you know, how you adapt in a healthy way to stress. What are you telling yourself? What are the messages that you're telling yourself throughout, so that you can build your capacity to bounce back when times have been tough. It is a learned skill. So can you, you know, it's going to be developed through behaviors and thoughts and actions as you move forward. And some of the ways that you can build resiliency include cultivating a positive outlook, reframing negative situations. What did I learn from that? How can I move? What will I change different? What will I do differently the next time something like that happens? It's creating a network of connections for yourself. It's holding yourself in self-compassion, right? The very first strategy we talked about, where you recognize that you're only human, you did the best you can, you're always doing the best you can, and sometimes it's going to be more difficult. Making friends with reality too. So for some people, that very first thing of I will do this caregiving role all by myself, when the reality is that it's not doable, that by yourself over the long haul. So even that very first dose of reality that I need to change some things so that I can be the best I can be and help my person in the best way I can. Right. And it's then prioritizing your well-being. So yes, you have a number of priorities in life. Every caregiver does have multiple things to care for, to care about, and to get done. And some self-care for you needs to be in the top of that list as well. So lastly, self-care is going to involve taking some action to identify your needs and then advocate for them, which is speaking to people saying, I need that yoga class twice a week, and so I'm going to go do it. I need to work, and I'm going to find some part-time work. So I need to find ways to have my person cared for in the times that I've gone to work. And again, that might sound like a little bit, easier said than done kind of thing. The needs of a care recipient are often pretty great, and yet, when was the last time somebody looked at your needs, right? So the only person who can really make sure your needs are being met are you. The doctors don't always ask. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they're good. I know the doctors at our seniors outpatient clinic, where they would see dementia patients and their caregivers, would definitely pull the caregivers out while the person with dementia was getting their medical kind of exam, and would have them have a little chat with a social worker or a case manager. And I always thought that was so important, that people were not getting left behind when all the attention is always focused on the person with dementia, right? So taking action means, trying to set an action plan up. And so, you want to focus maybe on one step at a time. What's the smallest thing you could do? What's the first thing you'd like to do? What's been niggling at the back of your brain that you really want to make some space for, right? I want to do my painting again. And so what's involved in that? Well, it might mean digging some paint supplies out of the box. It might mean clearing out then a space in your home for that easel and a table for your materials. So, right. So a number of things, step by step, what can you accomplish? It's important to write all those steps down though. It's just a bit of discipline. And for some people, checking off or scratching off that item on the to-do list can feel pretty self-satisfying. I know it works that way for me. My checking things off my to-do list in a physical way means I've progressed, I've moved forward. Keep your plans kind of, easy to reach for the short term, just till you get in the habit of setting action goals and objectives. Now, I know it's tough, but it's a bit of discipline. And again, if you value your health and you value the care that you give to the person you're caring for, then it might be well worth your effort to think about, how am I going to make something good happen for myself? So here's your homework. Write down one self-care focus on the top of a nice, clean, fresh sheet of paper. And then be specific. What small actions can you do this week? And so I'm sure you've all heard of the SMART goals at this point. So can you be specific about it? So how much are you going to do? Is it measurable? You're right, something you can do in the week, keeping it short and sweet. Is it achievable? Is it relevant? And does it have a time orientation? So when are you going to do it by? How often are you going to do it? So that's the last piece of self-care, only one of 6 different ways that you can practice your self-care as a caregiver. So in closing today, I hope you've gained a little bit of an idea of how to practice some self-compassion, how to practice some balance, and the other things that you can do to take care of your own spirit. You're doing an amazing job, a job not all that many people get to do. And it has some, as you, I'm sure, discovered, some huge emotional benefits for you, but it can also be a tough road to follow without some support around you. So the Family Caregivers of BC is certainly here to start providing some one-on-one emotional support when you need it, to help you find support groups if you'd like to talk to others, to share with you any and all resources that we know of with respect to your caregiving role, to even help you navigate the healthcare system, which is one of the really huge areas of stress for caregivers these days. It's certainly what I hear about in my support group. So please contact us if any of the information today resonated with you, if you'd like to follow up a little bit more. We do have, goal setting and action planning charts. We have circle of support charts, and lots of information on the other things we talked about today. Thank you so much for your interest. Thanks for inviting me to share some of this with you. And all the best in your caregiving role.
Okay, Gabi, thank you so much. That was really nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you from Saya. Hope I pronounced that right. Were there any, we have a couple of minutes. Are there any other questions from anyone? Were there any questions, Kasar?
Not that I can see, but you can put it in the chat if you have any questions.
Okay, good. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe then we can just close it off for today, do you think? Because
Actually, my wife has been helping me out for 22 years now, every night.
oh,
Not a
wow.
single day break.
Yes, that's beautiful. I hope you give her some breaks sometimes.
Yeah, we try. My children help me sometimes. So
Good. Good.
okay,
Okay.
we should end.
Yeah. Well, let's say farewell then to everyone, and yeah, let me know if there's other questions or concerns, Kasar, that might come up.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Bye, folks.